Imagine this. You step into the street. There is no music, no festival, no celebration. And yet, a woman stands in the middle of the road and begins to dance. Not with joy, not for entertainment. Her body moves as if it no longer belongs to her. Her feet won't stop. Her arms tremble. Her face is pale. At first, people laugh. Then they fall silent. Then they grow afraid. Because she does not stop. Hours pass, a full day passes, and suddenly they realize, this is not dancing. This is a sickness. This is a curse. This is the body rebelling against the mind. The year is 1518. The place is Strasbourg. And one of the most terrifying questions in history is born. If your body no longer obeys you, are you still in control? At first, there was silence. The street was ordinary. The city was alive. Then one woman stopped and moved. No one heard music. No one gave a signal. Yet her body began to dance on its own. People watched. Some smiled. Then the silence fell, because this dance did not stop. Her feet bled. Her breath broke. Her body trembled. But it did not stop. 1 hour passed. 2 hours passed. A day passed. She was still dancing. People stopped looking at her. They began looking at themselves, because fear had created a new question. If a person cannot control their own body, who will be next? Then another joined, and then another. The street filled, but there was no sound, only footsteps that would not end. This was not a celebration. It was not an illness. It was the body rebelling against the mind, and the city understood for the first time. The most terrifying thing is not death. The most terrifying thing is losing yourself. Day 1. On the first day, no one was afraid. At first, it only looked strange. A woman stood in the middle of the street and danced. People passed by. They stared. They smiled. She must be mad, they said. She'll stop soon. But she didn't. An hour passed, then another. The sun climbed higher, then slowly began to fall. She was still moving. Her feet struck the stone street again and again. Her hands did not obey her. Her face grew pale. Her lips cracked. Her breath came in sharp bursts. Yet her body refused to rest. By the end of the first day, her feet were bleeding. Her knees shook. Her body trembled from exhaustion. People stopped laughing. Someone brought water. Someone tried to hold her still. But she broke free, because this was no longer her choice. This dance was not a decision. When night fell, the street emptied. Shops closed. Doors were locked. But one thing remained. In the middle of the street, a woman was still dancing. No one stopped her, because for the first time, people understood. This was not funny. This was not normal. And the most frightening thought of all. This was only the first day. Day 2. On the second day, everyone understood one thing. This was not going away. The woman was still in the middle of the street. She had spent the night there. She had not slept. She had not rested. Her body had remained in motion through the darkness. Morning came, the city woke up, but she was still dancing. Now people no longer laughed. They stopped, they watched, and they were afraid. Her feet were swollen. Dried blood stuck to the stone beneath her. Every step was pain. But pain did not stop her. Her body was following its own rules now. Some said, "This is the devil." Others said, "This is a disease." And some simply stepped back, because there was no answer. By midday, another person began to dance, then another. People looked at each other. This was no longer coincidence. It was spreading. Now there were two people moving without rest, and the city realized, for the first time, this was not one person's problem. This was the city's problem. On the second day, fear became something without a name, and no one knew what tomorrow would bring. Day 3. By the third day, nothing was the same. When the city woke, there was no longer one dancer. There were several. In the street, 2 people were dancing, then 3, then 5. No one had called them. No music was playing, yet their bodies had found each other. This was no longer a single incident. It was spreading. People watched from behind windows, from half-closed doors. Anyone who stepped outside quickly stepped back in, because there was no celebration there, no relief, only movement that would not stop. Some dancers cried, some screamed, others danced in complete silence. Their bodies no longer recognized exhaustion. Feet were swollen, knees buckled, breath collapsed. But the motion did not end. One person fell, then stood again, and continued dancing. The first death happened in the street, then a second. Bodies lay on the stone ground, but the movement continued around them. In that moment, everyone understood. This was worse than disease. This was the body completely out of control. By the third day, fear ruled the city. Prayers were spoken, bells were rung, but nothing stopped the dancing. And for the first time, Strasbourg realized this was no longer about people. This was the city's nightmare. The numbers grew, dozens, then hundreds. People danced until their hearts gave out, until their legs broke, until they collapsed and never stood again. Some died mid-step. Their bodies fell to the ground, but those around them kept dancing. Imagine the sound, bare feet slapping against stone, heavy breathing, bones breaking, and a music no one could hear. Doctors had failed. City officials had failed. The city was no longer searching for explanations. It was searching for salvation. And then the church stepped in. The clergy declared, "This is not the work of man. This is a curse, a punishment from God." Church bells rang across the city. Prayers echoed through the streets. The dancers were gathered, not with force, but with hope. They were taken away from the streets to a sacred place. Inside the shrine, holy symbols were placed upon them. Holy water was sprinkled on their faces. Confessions were made. Knees hit the stone floor. Hands reached upward. They no longer danced in the streets. Now they danced on the cold stone floors of a place of worship. The movement was no longer motion. It was desperation. Prayers were spoken day and night. Rituals were performed without rest. The bells did not fall silent. And then, no one knew when it happened. No one knew how. But a moment came when bodies could no longer continue. Feet slowed. Arms fell. The movement weakened. The dancing began to fade, slowly, and then it stopped, as suddenly as it had begun. One day, the streets were full of movement. The next, they were silent. The city had survived, but it was no longer the same, because the people had learned something terrifying. Sometimes the greatest threat does not come from outside. Sometimes it comes from within the human body itself. And against that, no sword helps. No reason helps. The dancing stopped. The streets grew quiet. The bells fell silent. People returned to their homes, but nothing was the same. The city had survived. The bodies had stopped moving, but the questions remained. No one ever truly knew what had happened. Was it a disease, the result of hunger, mass fear, or the human mind breaking under pressure? History gives no clear answer, because perhaps the true horror was never the dancing itself. The true horror was realizing that humans do not always control their own bodies. In 1518, Strasbourg reminded the world of something deeply unsettling. Humans are not always masters of their minds. Sometimes the mind breaks, and the body chooses its own path. Today, we read this story in history books. But remember, this was not just a nightmare of the past. It is a shadow of being human, and shadows never truly disappear.